Let's go to Adam in Canada. What is your strongest proof for atheism? So I guess it's going to also depend on what people mean by atheism, which is a hot topic for some people. I'm inclined to I started on the position of I don't believe a God exists, and I've been more confident to the claim that gods do not exist. The only type of justification I could offer would be some type of like deductive argument, but I take a position that like Graham Oppy takes about arguments where like if I render you an argument that God doesn't exist, when we get to like premise 3, it's just going to assume something that you don't believe potentially, and you're just going to reject the premise. And so it won't have any force. So the better take is to just use arguments to show what someone else is convinced by and show them the contradiction. So in that case, like a God that can't fail and wants a world without evil, and then there's evil, we can go, well, hey, there's this God that can't fail, but failed at its action, which is a contradiction, therefore it doesn't exist. Those types of arguments you could use against specific gods, but for like global atheism, I'm not convinced that like a theist is going to be compelled by him, even if you are, because you're just going to assume some metaphysical considerations that they reject.
I mean, from the scientific perspective here, like, it's not something you can even demonstrate scientifically because, I mean, statistically even, we're in some weird problems where we have a universe of n equals 1. Our sample size is 1. How do we even make a control group where n equals 1? How do we even design a study? So that's where I'm at.
So mine was more like a thought experiment than a proof, I suppose. But the thought experiment was like, so just as it's a thought experiment. So there's going to be some things that are for argument that aren't actually possible. But say a new
that's fine.
being showed up from a completely different universe in the middle of Times Square. They looked around and they're in love immediately. There's things moving around. There's things in the air. There's clouds. They immediately go about trying to understand how all of it works based on our current understanding of the universe. So from the Big Bang, where we can get the radioactive or the microwave background, all the way up to stars forming and exploding numbers of times so they can get heavy elements, to planets forming, to where we are today, to our understanding of evolution, just loving every second of it, getting all the data that he could possibly get. Based on today's understanding, at what point would they then get into even the idea of religion and gods when it comes to how objective reality works?
How would they get to the idea of God from that set of information? Well, the propositional attitude,
collecting objective data, right? Or trying to understand how objective reality works. So not the subjective, but objective reality.
I would get, if it's a thought experiment and we're like in the philosophy domain at all, so I don't want to bore people, but it's going to matter what we mean, like in terms of like internalism or externalism for justification. Right. Because like, if you're an internalist or something, like you can be justified to say there's a tree there, when in fact it's like you're a brain in a vat, but you're in what furnishes your mental content or what you're experiencing subjectively, like is justified because it's part of your direct experience, even if it is some deception. So I would have a very that I don't want to sound like a cop out, but it's like sorry, go ahead.
There's a shared space between everybody who is subjective, right? And so it's the objective. But yes.
So that that's fine. So that would like assuming like externalism or something. So the question is what they would use. Sorry, go ahead.
A new creature from a different universe, different rules. So they've got to learn everything about this objective reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one is a question of whether or not the method or scope we have works. Then the other question is if it doesn't, then it sounds like we're kind of shit out of luck. I don't really know how we would. It's gonna depend, right? It's gonna depend on like certain norms that you have for deciphering truth. But for me, it could just be the case that there's some other way to detect at least the data. But I don't know. I don't really know how to answer the question, to be honest, because it just seems to assume more that's out of my access, I guess.
All right. It seems to me that if somebody just showed up today, was interested in figuring out how the world works, would have a pretty good explanation of it, and would then have to try to shoehorn a god into it, as opposed to.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I thought you were saying a different set, like a complete. Sorry, the objective part of the reality part I got confused on. So I was thinking you were saying like some different objective reality. I must have missed something there completely.
No,
sorry.
I just didn't want it to be, because I'm convinced that like God like can only, well, doesn't exist, but it is completely subjective. Like if humans cease to exist tomorrow, any idea of a God that we used to have ceases to exist as well, right? There is no, well, I don't think anybody on Earth has written anything correctly about anything supernatural.
Well, I mean, it's still going to be the case that if the state of affairs are true, that thing exists, but the actual access to knowing it is one thing. I mean, I guess my take, if I'm understanding it fully, it's been one of those mental days, is that to me, and I'm a skeptic, it seems to me that everything is consistent with a deception in the first place, right? So like, it could just be the case that whatever they shoehorn in to, like, the explanation of a god or something is really something that exists, but is presented itself as revelatory, but is just deceiving it, right? It wants it to think it's Yahweh, or it wants it to think it's Allah. In reality, it's just like masquerading as that thing. And so it's hard for me to, for me, it's that I think everything is underdetermined, and that's why science is a good methodology, in the sense of that you can produce kind of not, future predictions that are going to adjudicate one over the other. So I don't know if that necessarily answers the thought experiment of the question. I might have to go back and hear what you said to make sure I'm even digesting it right. But Ben, do you have anything, or do you?
This sounds like an area that it's getting into the philosophy weeds. I
think I'm just misinterpreting what was said. That's happened like 3 times today, so that's on me. So
yeah, no, I think I don't think I have much to add on that.
No worries. Maybe I'll try to put it together better and call back at a different time.
Well, maybe. Well, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that it's me. So,
oh no, and say, like my perspective is limited in these kinds of areas. So like, especially when we start bringing objectivity into it, like, I don't know, I'm a scientist.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry.
But
go ahead, Adam.
So natural and objective are similar to me, right? Like I'm saying subjective is the mental and objective is physical. So was I labeling it wrong?
Well, I mean that is, like, an idealist wouldn't agree with you, obviously, because they're not going to believe that things are physical in that case. Like, they're going to think objective reality is some mental phenomena or something like that. But but if you're just
okay, so they're
right. So a lot of this will assume certain metaphysical positions that someone else holds, which is why when I went into the internal externalism thing, is that, like, if someone's an externalist, they're going to, like, actually think there's an external world, an objective world for them to furnish their content. Whereas, like, someone who's like an internalist with justification can be perfectly happy saying, like, I'm in a matrix and it doesn't matter because my justification on things are going to be internal to me. And so the reason why that distinction, if I was tracking it right, matters is because it's going to assume different metaphysical outlooks on the world to begin with. So your explanation of some phenomena or the justification for it's going to be different than maybe someone else who holds, like, a different form of justification. But yeah, that's all nuanced, and for a lot of people, like, that, not the most exciting thing. And a lot of times I agree. So